So thanks, Justin, for doing this review of the cross-functional prioritization process from a UX leader's perspective. This is actually often what the UX team does, is they do these kinds of reviews of the product. This is actually kind of a review of a process in the handbook. So I've got links in our doc, link to the meeting. What actually might be good is if you share your screen, bring up that doc and then start clicking on those links, reading it through and see if it makes sense to you in terms of what the UX team needs to do.
Move it over to the right screen. Okay, so this is the first link, which is the handbook page documentation. Did that line up right? Cross-functional, yes, that's what you want. All right, so looking at this page, the first thing that I did was I just kind of read through it to try and wrap my head around what the gist was. And appropriate mix of those types of things. Yeah, all makes sense. And then this sentence to me is sort of saying each group has to kind of make their own determination on what the ratio is. This is a starting point, right? Prioritization will be done by these teams. Is this what you're looking for, by the way? Am I doing?
Yes, yes.
I mean, this is kind of, this is like you said.
You understand what you and your peers are supposed, is it clear what you and your peers need to do and how to do it and when to do it?
You also know that I read really slow.
No worries.
Yeah, so right now there isn't a lot of specifics on where the UX department fits in. I mean, I can extrapolate where, whenever I see product manager, our designers tend to work hand in hand with our PMs, with their PMs. Mm-hmm. So whenever I see if a PM is going to be looking at something, I just assume that the designer is going to have some form of input as well.
Mm-hmm.
When this was added, I might have added that. Someone added that. To talk about that component. So if there's no designer relevant, then don't worry about us. Who would be creating the board? I think that quality has been creating the boards, right? So it says that each team is encouraged to create a board.
Yeah, we haven't specified who creates it. Who's the DRI in doing it? I think it's anybody in the quad can do it, but it probably should be more, there should be a DRI. So it's not left to chance.
Right. I think I've seen quality doing it on the issues I've seen.
Take notes.
But I mean, I don't want to volunteer anyone. So if they're going to watch this video, I didn't do that. It wasn't me. Drag and drop reorder. So what is maybe useful to filter out certain issue types like UX that aren't relevant to implementation issues? Okay, so because we're focusing on MRs as our statistics, UX issues may show up on the board anyway, but they're not. Those are maybe being designed during that milestone, which means they won't be implemented then, they'll be implemented in the future. So we don't want to see those. Okay. That makes sense.
It does give the impression, as I read that, the UX, some could get the impression that the UX team is not important to the overall process. That's not the impression we're trying to give. This is very specific to one item, so maybe we can improve that.
Yeah, there's always been a problem when it comes to planning, because engineering is focused on what they're building, whereas UX is focused on what they're designing to be built.
Mm-hmm.
But they happen, those two things are working in a parallel track, you know? So it's been, this sentence is very typical of conversations I've had with product teams that want to use a single board. You know,
Yep.
It confuses engineering teams sometimes when they see UX, because they're like, well, am I supposed to be building that? And the answer is no, that's just what we're working on to get ahead of you so you can build it next milestone or the one after.
Mm-hmm.
So
Great feedback. Thank you.
Python milestone. And this one's interesting because I know every team sort of plans differently. Like Secure and Protect, we plan with every designer and every PM for all the groups that Secure and Protect represents for the SEC section, in essence. We plan all together. And we have a planning issue that we start planning on at the beginning of the current milestone for the next milestone. So on the 17th of milestone 15.1, we start planning for 15.2. Or at least that's when the issue gets created.
And for my edification, when does that get finalized for the next milestone? You start on the 17th.
It's finalized, yeah, a week before. So the first week I create an issue that says, hey, let's start thinking about the next things. So that means that the PM and the DRI designer need to start talking about what they want to accomplish in the next upcoming milestone. 2 weeks in, we have a formalized synchronous meeting, which is actually tomorrow for us, where we're going to go through everything and say, okay, this is where we're thinking about doing, and we think that it's going to be this. We think this is a prioritized item. Because what we need to do is we don't have enough designers for all the groups, for all the PMs. So we're trying to see who's got a higher priority, perhaps, or a higher need, so then we can apply the designer that will work on that. Third week in, we would say, this looks like we got a plan set. Please review it and give me a thumbs up if everyone's cool with this plan. And then sometime in that last fourth week, I meet with my designers to make sure they understand everything they need, and then we move forward with that plan. So this will need to be represented in that plan of how we're going to pick what to work on, right? But not every team starts that early, I don't think, or maybe isn't even that formalized. So that's where this will be interesting, is how to incorporate this with their existing process. And the flip side is that when you're planning, we're working with issues, but what you're looking at in these percents is MRs. And MRs don't equate one-to-one to issues. Like one issue could end up being 5 MRs, and then another issue can end up being 1.
This is a trailing MR. Measuring MRs is a trailing indicator on how we're doing on the benchmarks. The issues are a leading indicator, but they don't measure the same thing. We are working on something to look at the leading side as well, looking at issues as well, where our CTO and VP of product are going to review that before each release at an issue level. Knowing again that issues don't map to MRs one-to-one, and they map differently for and for features, maintenance, and bugs.
Right. Okay. And of course, you've got, I think I saw this in the MA, some other teams, they have different priorities, you know, like maybe they're a brand new group, so they need to lean more on features than anything else because they don't have maintenance costs or bugs to even worry about. So I don't know if that's referenced.
Good. Want to move to the next portion?
Yeah.
Or you're not ready yet. If not ready yet, that's fine.
No, let's go. Let's go. So in general, what I've been doing is I've been reading the issues that we're looking at next.
So this is an example of a issue for adoption of the overall process, not something to be done with every release or every quarter, just one time to track things. So thanks for bringing up. I found one where you're tagged in it, Justin. So it's less important to get this right for the long term, but in the short term, I want to see if this makes sense.
Okay.
Because it's about
This
adoption
one's
overall.
Yeah, this might be an anomaly because this is a brand new group that just got incorporated into the SEC section.
You want to look at the other one
technically
instead?
Yeah, they don't technically have a designer yet. I'm just the DRI because this whole thing's new, and
Okay.
wanted
Fair.
to make sure that they didn't get sort of left behind. Okay, so DAST. This is with Derek. I remember this conversation. So they thought this was a pilot, but it's not a pilot. So Derek fits into what I was saying earlier about our planning process, how we do it all as a group. So I think what's going to happen with each of the PMs and their engineering managers and their other their quad core counterparts is they're going to have to do this assessment prior to our planning, and then we're going to have to balance it out with the needs of everyone else.
So like in this example, this happens to be one of my teams, and thank you for your support of the team, is that Seth has said, as the engineering manager, he's provided his prioritized list to Derek on maintenance. Vinci, as the quality engineering manager, said she's given her prioritized list of bugs to Derek to prioritize, and then Derek hasn't prioritized it for the next milestone yet. Just that last checkbox is not in the description, is not done yet. But I know Derek's tracking this and is planning to do that, but that's why this is all but one task are done. And you're saying for this team, they do an issue, prioritize per release. Might actually be worth looking at that if you have an example.
Yeah, so this is our 15.3 planning issue.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe we'll look at the 15.2 one. Do you want to look at the future or the present?
The next one being planned.
Okay. So first look at the designer's capacities and what's going to be out. And then we break it up into each of the various groups. So composition analysis, this would be the set that they're working on. Container security, and then DAST, this would be Derek's. So over the next few days, this should be populated with expected issues that they either need to have done or nice to have done.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we'll do is we'll come together as a team and we'll review each group's series of issues to find out if there's any one that's got a higher priority. Because like I said, we don't have a 1-to-1 ratio when it comes to designer to PMs. We're a little bit off.
And this issue is specific to UX?
This is just UX.
Just UX, okay.
Yeah. So
Is there
Derek would
something
have to
similar
take
for maintenance or bugs or features?
and that's where this falls apart, because we would only track those if they were UX related.
Okay.
On this issue. So if there's a bug that requires UX design that's got a priority 1 or 2, something to that effect, then it would be put on here, right? Because it's prioritized in this process, the next prioritization process that, the quad came together and said, this bug really needs to happen this quarter or this milestone. So it would get on the list and it requires UX. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I think so.
But if it's not UX, we would never see it. The way that would impact UX is in terms of engineering resource.
Mm-hmm.
So then the PM would have to know that, well, while we have these things designed, I know that perhaps, and again, this is happening, we're designing now in order to be developed next milestone or the milestone after. So,
And do you tend to get the input on the priorities for things that are important to UX for each release? So I know this tracks the work you want to do and the work you're asked to do, which is great. How about are you getting the input you want and or need on what the team works on from a UX perspective? So you're doing your own side, but let's say, there's top 5, I'm just, we'll pick on DAST, but, unfairly, let's say you have your top 3 UX concerns for DAST, top 3 UX priorities for DAST. And you need, there's the UX side of that, but there's also, the engineers who need to go do the work after your team figures out what needs to be done to, improve the UX. How do you get your priorities in so the product manager and engineering manager make those things a priority?
so that's the difficult part. It's our issues. If they're just new features or we're building out an existing feature to add onto it, the only way we can get those prioritized is if the product manager agrees that they need to be prioritized.
And are they asking for your input?
There's no severity. Yeah, I mean, we should be talking to them in order to say, hey, this seems like it's really important based on our strategy and our direction page and that sort of thing. But then they have to balance that with what you're doing here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if it ends up that engineering has to focus on maintenance and bugs that are, let's say they're S1s, right? That those need to get done. We have slows to meet. So that means that something might get pushed out. But then that's when the PM's going to also have to balance where that particular group is at in terms of the maturity.
Mm-hmm.
If they have a very low maturity because they're still trying to build things up, then maybe, I don't know what the guidance is. Maybe they would push a maintenance or a bug in order to get the feature in. But then that's where this tripping point is that technically we're designing now when we're talking about managing maintenance and bugs today, whereas the design is for the future.
What we want to have happen is it should be the priorities per milestone should be one of the key parts is it's the what's put in a milestone is decided by the product manager based on feedback from the UX counterpart for the team, the engineering manager for the team, engineering manager focused on maintenance, and the quality lead for the team focused on bugs. We don't have anything formalized of it should be done in this way. It should be done in an issue per release and it's discussed, or it should be in an issue board, or, et cetera, et cetera. Different teams do it in different ways, but we want to make sure that's happening. That the discussion is with the quad and of those 4 parts, and they don't always need to agree, of course, but they need to collaborate so that the priorities are kept or tracked. And UX doesn't, at least in the current way we listed the process, which may need to be improved, doesn't give an explicit list of these are my priorities for this section, but they have influence on the overall priorities because UX is a part of many things rather than being a specific list of priorities. But as I say that, I know UX has a specific list of priorities. So I think we've got a bit of a disconnect there some of the time at least. And I'm thinking about how to resolve that. Am I overthinking that, or is that a challenge with the current process?
No, it's definitely a challenge. Generally, the problems that we're struggling with is we're very new feature oriented, and we have a lot of breadth and not a lot of depth. And sometimes that makes sense because maybe it is a new group and they're trying to build out their feature set so they can have parity with competitors. but then at some point, that's when the UX will need to come in and say, okay, we've got enough features. Now we need to really develop them. And that means we need to fix the bugs. We need to add depth to a particular feature. And that's where our priority influence would need to come in.
And I think UX isn't prioritizing a different list of things. Like the development manager is focusing on maintenance. The quality manager is focused on bugs. The product manager is focused on features. UX looks across all of those for what the priority should be from a UX perspective. So that's not bad or good, just different. And I think perhaps the UX lead per group should be providing that list of their priorities from a UX perspective. Then the product manager, and it'll be overlapped with the other lists in many ways. Then the product manager then takes all of that input from across the quad and then makes the decision per milestone. And we don't have that. We don't have that in the process currently, but I think we need something like that. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah. Yeah. At some, sure.
Yeah, this is really there's nothing like actually having somebody walk through it and say, does this work for me? Because then it really, especially somebody who wasn't involved in creating it, because, which is, I'm one of those people, because it's hard to see the forest from the trees. I've been looking at the trees from a while. So I really appreciate all your feedback on this. I know we're almost out of time. Anything else to add? Any other feedback?
I think that you're hitting at the crux of the gaps, I guess, so to speak.
Great.
So then after that, it's really just figuring out how to do it.
I will create an issue to track your feedback along with Juan's, and also I'm talking with Vinci tomorrow about quality, and Justin Ferris is interviewing a PM who wasn't involved with the process for the same things, which is great. All right. So thanks again.
Awesome. No problem, Wayne.